Hello everyone! Welcome back to our Lee County Library Science Club. It's great to have you with us once again. I just want to remind you all to please make sure you have your parents' permission and some supervision when you're doing these experiments with us. Our modern world is actually a pretty amazing place, even though we don't really realize it a lot of times. There are so many things that we take for granted that just happen in our everyday life that when you dig into them a little bit, they're kind of really incredible. But the advancement of science has just made them seem normal. One of those things that we're going to talk about today is actually something that we really should be using a lot of right now, and that is soap. Now I'm sure you're asking, what is so special about soap? We use it all the time, it's everywhere. Well, soap is actually a unique type of molecule known as a carboxylate. Now, what makes it unique? Well, we've talked before about types of molecules, especially water, and that water is a polar molecule. I'm sure I've said that many times, right? Water has a negative side and a positive side, and the polarity of the molecules helps the water to have cohesion and adhesion. And then there are other types of molecules that are nonpolar. All right, the electrons are evenly shared around the entire molecule, and there's no skewing of the charge to one end or the other. It's just the same charge all the way around. But carboxylates, like soap, actually have both polar and nonpolar within one molecule. Let me show you. This is a simple model of a carboxylate, okay? And it has one end that is polar. It's sometimes known as the head. Okay, they have a polar head and then a long tail of carbon and hydrogen atoms known as a hydrocarbon chain that runs out from that head, and that is nonpolar. So we have this long nonpolar side, and then we have this small polar head. So a soap molecule can actually interact with both polar molecules like water and nonpolar molecules like oil. So if that's such a strange thing, how does it even happen? Well, to make a carboxylate or soap molecule, you start with a fat molecule or a fatty acid, which is simply a bunch of hydrocarbon chains that are joined together by something like a glycerol molecule. And all of this is nonpolar. But if you take that fatty acid and you combine it with a base like sodium hydroxide, put a little heat in there and they'll react together, and the glycerol molecule on the end that joins all these hydrocarbons together, that will get pulled off by the base and will actually be replaced by the carboxyl group that becomes the polar head. If you want to learn more about soap or carboxylate molecules, one of them is called sodium laurate, and you can look up that name and see the structure of the molecule, and you can learn a little bit more about what soap molecules look like and how they operate. But the important thing that we want to know about today is how soap molecules or carboxylates behave when they are added to things like water and oil and other types of fluids. Well, normally, if the soap is just by itself, okay, you'll have these molecules kind of floating around, mixing together. Every now and then you'll have the polar parts come close to each other and they might stick together. But when you add these molecules to water, well, you have nonpolar ends that can't mix with the water, right? But you have polar ends that can. So what actually happens is the carboxylate molecules, the soap molecules, will come together. They'll actually form into basically a ball, where the outside edge of the ball is the polar heads, and these tails all point to the inside. So if you actually looked at it, you would just see the outer edge being all of these, and you wouldn't even see the non-polar tails. And so when you see soap mixing with water, it starts forming those little balls, and those are known as a micelle. It's just a large spherical grouping of the soap molecules all coming together so that they can mix properly with the water. And those micelles are how soap actually helps things like oil that can't normally dissolve in water. When you add soap to it, suddenly oil or grease or fat actually can dissolve into the water. And that is due to those micelles. When you have water and oil and add soap to them, the soap will actually form the micelles around the oil or fat molecules. So you will have polar water molecules interacting with the polar head around the outside of the micelle, and then the non-polar tails around the inside interacting with the non-polar fat molecules. And then they're just all able to mix together. Pretty cool, huh? But I realize that's a little bit hard to understand what is going on. So we are actually going to demonstrate the movement of the soap molecules today with some milk. Now, milk is not what we know of as a solution. Okay, we've talked before about a solution being a mixture of the molecules at their most basic components where they are fully integrated and mixed together. That is not what milk is. Milk is mostly water with some fat and protein and minerals mixed into it. But as we said, the fats and the proteins can't actually dissolve into the water. So they're just suspended in the water within the milk, and they're kind of all mixed together. So, when we add soap to that, we're going to see how the soap actually pushes itself into the micelles and moves itself around to try to trap those fat molecules within the micelles. So, what you'll need today is some milk, a large shallow pan that you can spread the milk out and really see it in it. We'll need some food coloring. I've got some fun neon colors today. You'll need a little bit of dish soap and a cotton swab or a Q-tip. So let's see how this works. So first, we just want to pour out the milk. Okay, make sure you've got a good layer covering the whole bottom of the pan. We're going to take our food coloring and just put some drops kind of wherever you want to throughout your milk. You can see right now, well, the color's mostly just staying where it is, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, it looks pretty cool, but it's nothing amazing yet. And if I just take a cotton swab normally, and I put it in here, well, nothing happens, right? It doesn't move anything around. But what is going to happen when we put some soap in there? So I'm going to take my soap, okay? Dip it right in there. Now you can see how the soap is traveling throughout the milk, right? It's actually moving, and that is those molecules seeking out the fat molecules and the proteins so that it can capture them within the micelles. And it's actually going to keep going and mixing until all of the soap molecules have formed into micelles. We can put a little bit more in here and see what happens. You see it's moving out from that drop where I put it, and it's spreading through the milk, capturing more of those fat molecules. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? You'll notice I didn't swirl anything, I didn't move anything. All I did was drop some soap in there, and it has done all the rest itself. So we know that washing things is important to deal with germs and dirt and all kinds of stuff, right? But I hope that right there showed you how important it is to actually use soap when we wash. Alright? Dishes that might be covered in grease and oil. Alright? Your hands that have bacteria and viruses on them. Even your clothes that can sometimes get those things into them. Water itself is not enough to be able to remove everything, because, as we've said many times, water is polar. So any molecules, any dirt that might be polar, the water will easily wash that away. But a lot of organic things, like fat molecules, they're nonpolar. So the water does not have an easy time washing them away. But put a little bit of soap in it, and it'll capture it all right up and clean it away. So please make sure when you wash your hands you use some soap and hot water. But I definitely want you to try this at home so you can see just how much it moves and how active the soap molecules actually are in forming those micelles. Soap is a really good helper towards having good hygiene and for keeping us all safe. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye!